Okay, cool. I think we're good. Ed, it looks like maybe you're ready.
Yeah, almost. So I'll get there. I'm going to reset my node just so I know where the starting point is. And so I'm scrolling up in this window that's going to disappear. Well, I'll do it a different way. So what I'm showing here is on the left is this wallet I'm calling Diggin Wallet, and I've got these test buttons. Behind these buttons are some rholang code that is being deployed, and then I do a listen for data at name. And so I just talk about that pattern, but I also want to be able to show it running as well. So I'm going to launch a node here. Let's see. And for my particular setup, I've got a bunch of proxy servers between my code and proxy servers between my JavaScript code at the end of the day and the R node. So I'm gonna set up that and see what it looks like.
That turns out to be kind of a common pattern developing on our chain specifically, is that you put some kind of proxy between your browser front end and the node itself.
Yeah, in the case of why I needed to do that had to do with gRPC and HTML 1.1 aren't too friendly with each other because HTML puts headers and tailors on it. So this Envoy proxy removes the headers and tailors when you're talking straight gRPC. Envoy also can expose a REST API that's more friendly for get and post style, and I think it returns JSON packets, but I haven't explored that package. So I'm using Scala.js and gRPC to deal with it, and it turns out that that's helpful to me for all this parsing that I've got to do. All right, let me see if this.
So Ed, you're saying that directly from browser you cannot access gRPC.
I believe that's the case.
Yeah, that's right. I confirm that.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you can, it'll talk, but it'll get really confused because of this headers and tailors thing.
Okay.
Now that may change in future browsers that are, HTML2 compliant or something, but I didn't quite track it down.
I see.
Okay. So let's try this again. See, I think I need to close that guy. I'm gonna close all.
So Ed, it looks like you're developing on Windows now. I haven't been able to run R node on Windows yet.
I'm running R node inside of a Docker.
Oh, yeah, great.
So Ed and Joshy, this is Gary. Are you saying that the configuration you run, this may be a good configuration that everybody goes to until this problem is solved?
Yeah, so this is the way I would frame it. If you want to develop specifically on our chain, what Ed's described here, or the basically equivalent thing with our chain API, are going to be necessary. If your interest is specifically rholang, you have more options that we can maybe get into. But yeah, this is the state of the art for our chain. Definitely recommended.
Yeah, and there's two flavors of Envoy configuration. The one I'm using is where the client is speaking gRPC, and the other one that I haven't explored is, I believe, posts and gets that may return JSON blobs, but then you still need to deal with parsing the gRPC payloads in and out of it. So that would require, a lot of libraries on the, or equivalent on the client. So again, I haven't explored that one. Okay, so now it's back up and running. I've got the developer tools in Chrome. Just reset. So I'm going to, these are the same as the scripts that were demoed a week and a half ago. I'm calling them different things. This was the Genesis contract, which I call a faucet. I've modified them a little bit. You see it's returning 0, which is not what I expected to see. Wonder why that's the case. I think I broke some code, so I may not be able to demo this perfectly now. I'm going to record this separately, and after I fix this, but this should still allow us to get to the code. But what this is doing behind the scenes is, again, it's doing a deploy, a propose, which is called in gRPC create block, and then it is doing a listen for data at name, and then it's parsing the results and updating the UI of that. So let's just check the gene address. It's 0. So yeah, this is something I'm doing wrong, but you'll still see, you'll still get the idea from the code. So I don't want to fix that bug now, but let's look at some of this code behind here and what it's doing.
Hey Ed, did you also change your node version for node testing right before this by any chance?
No, I'm on 0.9.1.
Okay.
My code doesn't handle signature creation yet.
Yeah.
Which is, it's going to take a little bit of time for me to do. But let me just give you a flavor of what's going on. So here's the create Genesis function. This is Scala.js we're looking at. So the button calls this function with rev address and rev amount. And you see, among other things, this deploy term. And what I've done was to create a deployment channel that is essentially per invocation, so that this is the public name that which I'll listen to later. And so what you see in the code is I've got some comments here that are coming from the Scala.js variable. So I'm being friendly, that if someone's looking at the logs, they'll know where this stuff is coming from. And then I substitute in the rev address that's selected in the UI. Same thing here. And then rather than putting this stuff down what was in the log, and I did that for a while because it turned out for me what this rholang generated was a bit too noisy for me to parse, although since then I've figured out how to do it. And this is sort of the crux of what we're setting up. How do you write rholang that at the end of the day is easy to parse? And if you're doing not just a lot of rholang, I'm just doing 4 contracts here, or 3 contracts. The what was called the Genesis, check balance, check my rev address, and transfer, right? So as it turns out, I essentially need probably will need 2 parsers, a parser for the happy path, which you could think of as standard out, and I need a parser for the failure path. And this is the failures that are sort of normal and expected from our chain. They're not exceptions in the programming sense, right? They're like, you don't have enough rev to pay gas, or you can't transfer 100 rev because you only have 1. those kinds of exceptions. But let me drill let me drill down a little bit more. Let's see, where is this? So I create this rholang, and then I call this other method called deploy, propose, listen, and parse. So it turns out this is a very useful pattern for me. And as I drill into that, this took me a couple days to get these 3 lines. So I won't explain in detail the Scala syntax, but just to give you the idea is I'm deploying, and then after that I'm creating a block, and then doing this listen and parse. And then depending on the results of listen and parse, I send it back to the caller as either a good thing, which in this paradigm is Scala's either, so it's either right or left. So right is the happy path, or it's not the happy path. And so this paradigm of these calls, and I want to extend this down into the row, is that it can either return, again, this standard out, which is happy, or standard error might not be the right term, but the message, or the messages that come out of a rholang, let's say, like when you have insufficient balance or out of gas, are different than, yes, succeeded to transfer.
Yeah. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that in many useful programs, all of the responses can be dichotomized into this is a good answer, things worked, versus this is an error message. And that's a pattern you're trying to capture here. Yes,
exactly. So there's a couple ways to do this. One is to sort of have 2 channels that come back. So I was just setting up the one earlier. Let me go back. I was just setting up this per deployment channel, but I could actually set up 2 channels, one for good stuff and one for bad stuff. Because let me drill back in, because this listen and parse. Let me see, where did I put this? Okay, so here's when it gets back all the way up to the UI, this is what is checking the result from that deploy, propose, listen, parse. That it's checking to see if it's getting the right format, and then displaying 2 different things to the user if it's on the happy path or the not happy path. And so, yeah, going back to this rholang, what I think I'm going to do next here is send it. There's a couple different patterns. One is to send it 2 different channels, and maybe I listen to the first channel, just see if it's happy, and if there's nothing comes back, listen to the bad channel, or the standard error, let's call it. But another way to do this is just to always return first a Boolean that says, like true or false. If it's true, it was happy. If it's false, then take this other thing, and then the resulting payload is different. So let's just to give you an appreciation of what comes back on.
Hey Ed, while you're on rholang, I wanted to just look at line 229 that you're showing there, because they sort of do I think that's Arthur's code rholang code that you're looking at there, and it sort of does an example of how to do this either type, the, you know, like the failure type or the success type.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, and he says that this is from the vault. So we could return this back up to this rholang samples, and so yeah, maybe that's exactly what his intent was. We just didn't. It wasn't either followed in this particular rholang, or I didn't understand it. Do you want to elaborate?
So that's one example of how to do what you're describing, right?
Yes. In a more general sense, though, the you know, this is just true, false, and strings, and this this either here is a not a Scala either, but it is a it's a co-op type for so protobuf can deal with these returns in a consistent way.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
And it works, but it wasn't obvious how it works, because it's a lot different than the Scala either returns two different complete types, but on protobuf the message payload or the return payload has to be identical in either case. So that's why the core team had to construct this either, which the full type is coop.rchain.either.either.
Gotcha.
And yeah, so I deal with that elsewhere in the code, but the same approach would also work at the row that we're creating. In fact, we could look at the vault rholang and see how that's done. But what I'm leaning to, well, this could work. The tricky thing is sometime this true string that would be here, it says true A. I guess A could be any structure. It could be a sequence of integers, an integer, Boolean, string. It could be anything. But this is the pattern that I think would be great to talk about. Any questions thus far?
Yeah, I have a question. Did you see this open issue that they opened? Exactly about this either thing.
I don't recall seeing it.
I write a URL in the chat, and I have a question. I see this as you mentioned that you can encode this in two different ways, right? With two channels and with or with one structure that holds both both values. And these two patterns are not really the same, right? Because Dan already mentioned this. This one channel will be like a left without ever calling. But this is not the only change, because I see this as a synchronous and asynchronous, because you must wait on both channels, right? You don't get all the answers in one.
Right.
Answer.
That's why I think it's actually a problem to have two channels. It makes the client code a little more error prone. Already there's times where you're listening for a return and it just doesn't happen to arrive for whatever reason. So that's a kind of a one kind of case. So the combinatorics get a little messy. So I like this kind of pattern that is on 229. Maybe not. Yeah, I guess pretty much like it is. I guess the false could return, rather than a string, it could be more interesting, but it's nice to have on the client side a consistent parser. And already I believe I'm going to need, a different parsing pattern for the trues, because what you get back is going to be different. And so, I mean, you could return a string that you parse later or something, but in the case of things like integers, I don't know if I want to change it to a string and back and all that. So
Can you clarify this? Because I'm not sure that when you're saying that you need to parse different structures.
yes.
So you're not using rholang API, right?
I'm not.
Because you are using Scala.js.
Yes.
Right.
But the rholang API, I think, has to deal with it, or the client would also.
Yeah.
That's right.
So my question is, are you thinking about the structure where it's not only like a map or a list, but are you thinking about the structure where you have some kind of rholang expression inside?
Yes, what's the right word? It's not
a proper process, not one of these ground terms that's data, but like an actual send or something.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Let me see if I can show an example here. And again, I don't
because
know.
I'm thinking that it should be really easy translation from a map or from a list if you have this all the ground terms inside. So this should be like an easy translation. And I'm not sure if you have a rholang term how to do this.
Yeah, so I think I wanted to draw the distinction real quick about returning data. There's one way that I would argue is the best way to have separate your like success and error messages. And I just now realized during this conversation that I've always advocated multiple channels because I've always been thinking about programming like within the rholang world, returning to other rholang code. But now that I'm seeing, Ed actually doing this from the outside, I'm pretty convinced like especially from the client, you want your data coming back and knowing where it's coming back, right?
Yeah, and just once. So here's an example of when I do the send, or this is transfer rev, I think it is called. So this is what I get back on the what's called the listening name data response. And so this is fine to parse. You see this gbool, which is the gRPC type, and false. Or no, that's not gRPC type. I think that's maybe it is gRPC type. But anyway, you see the false here that it failed.
Maybe this is a ground type. Like a ground type.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know.
Okay.
But so you see the false, and then you see the reason why later it says invalid auth key. So this is being bubbled up. This invalid auth key is actually not in the rholang code that I deployed, but it's in the underlying vault contract where this invalid auth key is coming. And so this is fine. I would need to parse this. And I think this pattern that was in the comment helps me parse this, but I just need to parse differently on success versus this false. And then if the false is bubbled up from a called contract, it might look different than the false that the rholang itself that was deployed generates. Like, for example,
okay, but Ed, are you using the string that you're receiving for gRPC, or are you using some library in Scala to?
I'm used to parse this.
Yeah.
I'm using a library that was generated from the Proto-C compiler. So I'll show you what it's.
Then it should be like you don't have to do this parsing manually, right?
I don't, but yeah, it took me a while to figure this out.
I see.
So you see some of this write.get.head.toString.
Yeah.
And let me just show you a few other examples that are.
Yeah, you exactly navigate through these protobuf types.
Right,
Right.
and it works. It just took me a bit to figure out, and the tricky thing is, I want it to be consistent, so that I'm not doing special things everywhere. And maybe that's just what I have to do, because the let's call it the success state. Maybe the success state has to be different, but the failure mode, I don't want to be different everywhere. So that, anyway, that sets up the discussion. And I'm not sure where you suggest we take this next.
Well, first of all, thanks a lot for sharing. I really appreciate that.
Sure.
Yeah, that's very nice.
Yeah, I mean, I want to turn it to anybody, like if anybody wants to follow up in whatever direction they'd like, and then I might nudge us toward the underlying rholang code that like powers those wallet buttons.
Yeah, and I'm happy to, well, we have that code, but I'm happy to put mine in there as well, but it's very close to what.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, does anybody else want to share, or what should I go into the cell and how we used it for Ed's logging purposes?
I'm for that.
Yeah, I'd like to see that as well.
All right, nice. I'll take the screen share here. Oh, this is the issue that Tomislav was linking.
Oh yeah.
So these are just several examples of like different people's attempts to solve exactly the same problem there. And so Ed, maybe I'll just mention you in here so you have it easily.
Yeah, and also how to represent this in JSON.
Yeah. Ed, what's your GitHub name?
That's a good question. I think it's Ed Eichholt with no space.
Well, I'm going to mention somebody.
Oh, there's an H in it, yeah. EYKH.
Yeah, my bad.
EYKH, there you go.
Perfect. Ooh, it turned bold. That's probably it. So, oh yeah. So, all right. Well, so let's do this then. I'm going to get a new editor. And we'll start to write some rholang code, and we'll start to work toward a way that I had considered when we were talking about how to build up log messages on chain. Because sometimes you will deploy code that has like several intermediate steps, and you want to get a status, you know, step 1 complete, step 2 complete, step 3 complete, and you just want those to build up on chain until you're ready to check them, either from an off-chain context like a front end like Ed was showing, or just from another contract that is going to be executed later on. So I want to start out with the example of just the cell pattern. And what the cell pattern does is it gives us a way to implement mutable state in rholang. So mutable state is basically like in some languages, like in Python, for example, you can do x equals 5, and then later you can do x equals 9. And it's the same exact x, you've just changed its value. Whereas in Rholang, the data types are by default immutable. So what we have to do is use a channel basically as a variable. So let me just give an example. So we'll start off by making a new channel, and we'll just call it new data channel. So the data channel is the holding place for our data. And then what we might want to do is, or what in the simple case, what we need to do is give it some initial data. So let's just say we're going to store some number, and then later on maybe we'll you know, have capabilities to change the number or just read out what the number is. So we started out by giving it an initial value. So this sends the ground process 0, which is an integer on the channel data channel. And now what we need to do is basically write our accessor methods. So we need a way to read the current value and our modifier methods. We need a way to mutate the value. All right. And so we'll do those in rholang as contracts. So we'll want to do something like contract read and contract, well, I'll just call it set. All right, and then since I want to save this to get syntax highlighting too. Sell that row. All right, that's much nicer. And I'll do that while we're at it. Okay, so I made these new names here, read and set. And if I really want them to be private names like this, then I need to declare them up here. Read, set. All right. And so when we want to read a value out of the data channel, but unlike many programming languages, this isn't like calling a function where you're going to get a return value back. All the communication happens by explicit message passing. So if I expect this read contract to give me a value back, I have to give it a callback number, a way to get back to me. So it'll take in some channel called the return channel. And what the read channel does is it reads the old data off of the data channel. So we do a read like this for data from data channel. And then I'll just pause here for questions or suggestions about how to continue.
You should just return the data on the return channel. Send the data on the return channel.
Okay, yeah, good. So this is the place where the caller expected the data to go. So we'll go ahead and send it there. So the exclamation point is a send. Okay, good.
Oh, but now there's nothing on the data channel.
Yeah, bingo. Okay, so what's the solution?
Well, do we want to increment what's on the data channel or something?
In this case, we don't want to change it unless we call this method.
Yeah, okay. So let's also send the data back to the data channel, I guess.
Nice. Perfect. Whoops. And then since we're going to run this with the with our node, we have to get the stars and ats right.
Yep.
That looks better. Okay, good. And then I actually, Tomislav, I wanted to ask you, like, is this related to what you were telling me the other day about, like, whether data is linear or something like that? Like I duplicated it here and that makes it nonlinear? Or is this a different idea?
I was mentioning a linear band as a linear linear type in rholang.
Yeah, so this is like the linear bind here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this is the concurrent version of only one used variable in lambda count.
Oh, I see. Oh, but then when we do something like this, or the more explicit double arrow for, you're saying then that's different than linear, and that's like
double arrow should be like a normal variable in normal language. When you can like use it multiple times and.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's the difference about whether using it uses it up. Like,
yeah, because when you receive something, it's gone. You cannot receive it again.
Right.
So this is like a concurrent version of
semantics. Oh, well, this actually even is a way to get around that kind of, right? Because we're putting it back onto the data channel here, so it's almost yeah.
So how does doing something like this differ from like using, say, like a peak or something like that?
Oh yeah, peak is syntactic sugar for this pattern basically, and normally normally I write it in this order to make that more obvious. So peaking would be just pulling the data off the data channel,
immediately sending it back.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, cool.
And the beauty of doing it. So this is like the manual way because this works today, but the beauty of doing it this way is that now it's obvious that this is a read-only operation, that we're not going to mutate the data in here. And that
Mhm.
means that like if 2 or 3 or 10 people are trying to peek at the data concurrently, we don't need a total ordering or any ordering over who did it in what order, because they're all only reading it. No one's mutating.
Yeah, right.
Mm.
So the exclamation point is like a repeated send. How do you describe the less than exclamation?
Yeah, this operator, it's known as peek. So let me
Oh, okay.
is called peek, and it's not yet implemented, but it's a cool idea. And in terms of semantics and making your program do what you want, it's exactly identical to what we've done here, which means read the data off and then put it right back on.
Yeah.
But for performance, it's nice to know when you're having read-only operations so that you know that you don't have to care about order.
Mhm.
Okay.
So in a sense, this is like a little different semantics when you write peek and the code like this.
That's right.
Because, and if you use a bundle for this data, so that you cannot send on the data channel. If data channel is a bundle that you cannot send on,
Yeah, that's right.
then it's become the same, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's true. If this is a read-only channel, we can't express peek without the actual peek operator.
Oh.
Because we wouldn't be able to do this
So-
part. That's what you're saying, right?
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
So why you don't? You said we cannot use this without peek.
Well, he's saying
why-
'cause, if you're saying you only have a read-only bundle, then you wouldn't be able to do this right back to the data channel.
Yeah, but so in that case, this is the same semantics as peek.
No, I mean, you're talking about like what runs today. Like if this is a read-only channel, no, if data channel is a read-only channel, then this is no longer the same semantics as peek.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because if a data channel is a read-only channel, this listen works just fine. I'm allowed to read data from data channel, but then when I try to be a good citizen and put it back for other people to read later, I can't because I don't have permission to write here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, in that sense, it's the same as peek, because you cannot write on it. You can only read it. So.
Yeah, that's right. But I guess the subtlety.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. You must put it back. You must.
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry.
Cool. But no, I'm glad that we went into that actually in detail.
Okay, thanks.
So, all right, so let's write set here real quick. So when we wanted to read the data, all we needed was to pass in was like, hey, where to give me the number back. So what should our params be for set? Let's see who's on there. Oh, Peter's on the call. Hi, Peter. Gary. All right, well, I'll just say we have to put in a new value. And so this time, so let me ask you this question. Is this the right thing to do? Add new val. Whoops, like that. So the question is, does this successfully mutate and like update the value on the data channel?
Read it first.
Yeah.
Well, now you're just going to have two things on data channel, right?
Yeah, that's right. I think that's what Jim said too, but it was a little bit.
Yeah, I couldn't hear him.
Yeah. You should read it first.
Yeah, I read it first. Okay, right. So let me
Because
ask
you want to really
Oh.
discard this first one. This the
what
old
if
one.
I do this? What if I'm like, oh yeah, of course I have to read first. So what if I do this? If I read the old data from the data channel, and then like I don't have to do anything else there. Does that work?
If you want to risk, this will work.
Yeah,
If we
well, you
what?
might
Erase?
read the new value as old data.
Yeah, that's right. We want to make sure we pull the old one off first so that we
Yeah.
don't accidentally read back off the one we just did.
Yeah, you should put that in the continuation then.
Right. Nice.
But they should work in 50% of the cases.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
There's some percentage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's probably right. We can write some code to test it, but what I usually like to do is actually just run it like this first, just so I get all my like, you know, typo errors and forgot to declare stuff errors and forgotten par errors and stuff in time. So I'm gonna start a new R node, standalone mode, no UPnP, and we're gonna use that as our interpreter.
And so this whole code that you just wrote up, this is the cell pattern, or what you're calling the cell pattern?
This is the basic workings of the cell pattern. And what I also want to show is, so like what we did here is created exactly one. And what you don't want is to have to copy paste 25 lines of code every time you need a cell. So what I want to show next is how to make a cell factory.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a great question. This is the cell pattern. That's exactly right.
But is this set should also accept return channel?
Yeah, so there's lots of ways we could do this. You could you might want to get back the old data here, or you might want to get back just an ACK or something, and so we can totally do that too. And then we could like return send.
And if we don't have return channel, what we lose? We cannot sequence operations, right?
That's right. You don't have the ability to, as the caller, say, okay, I know I've completed updating this variable. Now I want to do the next thing. The best you can do is concurrently do two things. Okay, let's see. All right, the node is up. So over here, I did rnode run standalone no UPnP, and then in a different terminal, rnode eval. What did I call that? Cell.rho. Oh, amazing. It actually ran.
Nice.
All right, cool. So now we have to write a test or something to make it useful. So let's say, oh, well, we're going to want this now. And then let's just, I guess we'll check the data twice and see if we get the same thing. So for data from data channel, standard out data. And then we'll go ahead and check it again. Oh, that's not how you do it. Duh. What mistake did I just make here?
I want to do a read, not.
Yeah, that's right. I just yanked the data permanently off the data. And this is actually why we need the factory too, because it'll allow us to encapsulate that data channel and keep it private. But okay, so let's do it right. I wanted to do I wanted to make a new answer channel. This is where I'm going to get my answer back from, and then I want to call read, and I'll give it my answer channel. So calls up the read contract, which we wrote here. Answer channel is what's now known as return, and this thing should give me back the answer on return channel. So now we can listen to it. And I guess we'll just standard out. The answer was answer. That's enough. Let's see if that works. And so it gives us confirmation that it ran the thing and dumps the whole tuple space here on the eval terminal, but the output comes from the actual node. And the answer was 0.
Nice.
Great. Yeah. So I guess now we need to make sure mutation works.
And quick question, syntax, the brackets here were for easier parsing later, or were they required?
Great question. Yeah. So in most normal languages, you would just do something like this. The answer was, and then concatenate, right? So in some languages are strict about this. Like Python will say can't concatenate string with integer, And so you have to cast it and do something like this. Well, rholang doesn't have that yet. And so
What
basically,
does it have? Answer.toString? Or no?
I don't know. I don't think so. Like that?
Yeah.
Maybe it does. That would be really, really great.
Well, because there's pieces of Scala that creep into this because it goes through a rholang. The rholang interpreter uses Scala, so I don't know actually.
Well, it didn't give me. Sometimes you gotta really hunt for error messages. I wonder if there's one.
But yeah, but sometimes you don't get any error message if something is, for example, if you just put answer, you will not get any message.
Okay, never mind then. All right.
So
Yeah, but
yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up though, Ed, because I
Can you try again without the parens after toString?
yeah, totally.
Sorry, it's been a question of mine. No, you
Yeah,
still need
well,
one
okay.
parent.
Yeah, you might need a right paren though.
Oh yeah, crap. Sorry. Hold on. All right.
I doubt if this works, but it would be really interesting if it does.
Yeah, I think all the methods need arguments though, or at least that's how I've always.
Okay.
Yeah, I also think. But it will be also nice that this standard output can receive multiple arguments. This would be also nice.
That would be wonderful. Yeah.
You
Okay,
mean
thanks
if it was
for
like a
trying, Joshy.
tuple instead of a list? Oh, sorry, Ed.
Oh, thanks for trying, Joshy.
Yeah, no problem. I can shed some more insight into what's going on here too, though. That's what I was about to show. So on the rholang cheat sheet, which we made, I mean, so this is a little outdated. This was made for like our node 0.7, I think. But rholang hasn't changed that much since then, so it's still pretty useful. But I've documented all the methods that do exist on the data structures.
Mm.
And then there was something else I thought we were going to talk. Oh yeah, I can show you something that does work. I didn't do it in this case because it's usually more of a pain than it's worth. But if you really care about these strings looking nice, there is string interpolation for most data types.
Mm.
So I can do something like the answer was X, and then 2% is the string interpolation operator. And over here, I give it a map of substitutions. So for X, I want to substitute in answer. And in general, there might be like, you know, for Y, I want to substitute whatever. But in this case, there's only one.
Mm.
So I think that will work.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. And it'll take whatever it gets for answer and just substitute it in for X there. And
That's right.
Yeah,
so
that's
I think
cool.
this interpolation might be a way to access Scala's ability to already know how to two-string most things.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is not
Nice.
this is not the Scala ability because this standard output accepts rolling term, and this code can will like make a case for each rolling term how to express it in a string.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So maybe it should be useful to have this function directly in rolling. So
yeah.
this,
Oh, it absolutely would. Yeah. Yeah. And it would even just be, you know, it could be something like.
But I also think that what you wrote is like also the same.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking that.
Yeah. Nice. My only complaints that I've had about this are two. And it's that sometimes this is pretty long to write. Like if you want to sub in more than one or two things, it's definitely going to line wrap. And that's mostly just me whining. Oh, or like I would love to do it like this, like subs equals, and then I put all this stuff up here. And then I just make it obvious that I want to interpolate with subs, but we don't have let bindings yet. So it's just like one little paper cut kind of inconveniences that it's doing.
Oh yeah, but you can use a match like then.
Yeah, that's right. That was such a good idea. Yeah. So that.
But I would also like to put answer directly inside the string. You know.
Yeah, totally. Oh yeah, right. I want to do this.
Yeah.
That's the way I want to do it. Totally.
Yeah.
But anyway, well, it doesn't matter. It does.
But I like the match. So.
I like the match also. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's make sure that's in a working state before we go on to new stuff. Yeah, perfect. All right. Should say the answer was 0. That's great. So One problem with the way that I've implemented this right now is that in order to have access to read and set, I have to write my code here inside the same scope where some of this other stuff lives. Mm-hmm. And what I'd like to do is keep data channel out of, I want it to not be in scope where the user is actually using this thing, because that gives the user the possibility to accidentally do what I almost did, which was like read the data directly off the data channel and possibly forget to put it back. So there's a couple ways to do it, and I'll do the simpler one first. And oh, wait a second. Yeah, it goes like this. I just don't want to declare data channel at the top level. Instead, I want to declare data channel here. And the trick is I only encapsulate these parts inside the scope of data channel. So this bracket that I'm highlighting here, oh wait, I might have mismatched something. Oh yeah, this is the one that is data channel scope. So data channel is accessible from 8 through 28. And now down here where I'm writing my code, read and set are still in scope because I declared them out at the top level, but data channel isn't anymore.
That's really cool. That definitely, that really reminds me of the ML modules and signatures, just because it's like the most recent thing I've seen that's like really close to this.
Yeah, totally. Totally. So the idea here is tests at the bottom can't directly access the data channel. Okay, cool. So that's pretty nice. I guess now that we have that structure a little bit better, we probably should make our tests more precise and make sure we can modify this thing too. So let's, on the set channel, we'll pass in our new value. We'll just, I guess we'll change it to 6. And we also have to give a return channel. So I'm just going to recycle the one I used before, answer channel. And then we'll listen for answer from answer channel. Then we can go ahead and read again. Whoops. And finally, we can listen for the read to come back. And you notice every time you write these tests, if you want to do thing A, then thing B, then thing C, you get deeper nested every time because you're always going, waiting for something to finish means going inside the continuation of a for.
Yeah.
So finally, answer from answer channel. Oh, and I didn't need to bind one here. I was just waiting for an act to come back. We just want to do this again. Okay, hey, that worked great.
Nice.
So, okay, so it's basically the top of the hour. So this is the official end if anyone wants to bail. One thing I wanted to show was how to make this reusable so that I could easily create 2 or 3 cells without copy pasting it. But I'll open this up for anyone to say like last minute questions if they have to leave at the top. All right, cool. Nutzipper, how are you doing? We got anything we should talk about?
Not really. I just interested in what Ed been talking about in the beginning. How to actually I have a feeling that he been talking about how to have some kind of response from a blockchain. So you're doing some request with your deploy, and you should have some data back. And how to have the data back, it's not clear for me. And I have a feeling that he was talking about this topic. And I didn't quite get the proxy thing. So maybe.
Well, I can. My thinking on how to approach this has evolved a little bit during this call, which is, depending on the mode that the rholang is running in, it's going to respond with one set of data or another set of data, and that data could look differently. And so I was describing it as sort of the happy path and the failure path, but more generally, I think there could be many modes that it could return. For example, let's say you want to do a faucet operation or create Genesis operation, it could return in, sorry, your rev vault already existed and it has a balance of 100. Or the second mode is, 2, I created a new rev vault for you and gave you a faucet of 9,000 test rocks. Or 3, some other error because, of whatever, way down deep in the stack. So that's 3 different modes. I think one of the patterns could be that you could think of the return as having 3 different signatures, and maybe the first operation would be which signature is the rest of it. And so you could say that that's true or false or an integer for the parser that you would eventually need. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, but I'm not sure that I've been asking about that. My question was, I'm not really haven't been digging a lot into JS client or Arnode client or client that then being developed, but I still not don't know and not feel comfortable with how to get response from my deploy. So if I do deploy from Arnode CLI, so I just have, here is a block, that's it. And how do I check some complex stuff that that's being produced by that deploy to show in the CLI? From what you said, I have a feeling that you are running a node, putting some kind of proxy in front of it, and watch for traffic that go into that node and parse that stuff.
Well, I'm doing a deploy, and then I'm doing a propose block, waiting for that to finish, and then I'm doing listen for data at name.
Maybe I can clarify a little. From a perspective, what you are sending and receiving when you're doing deploy or propose, you're sending gRPC message that has type defined in protobuf files.
Yes.
And data that you are receiving is also data defined in protobuf files.
Yes.
And this proxy is only about changing headers and not about changing data.
Correct.
So you will get exactly the same data structure defined is in protobuf files.
Correct.
But these protobuf files, when they are converted to regular JSON or something that your client code receives, it's usually deeply nested, and it has many tags, and this is why Ed showing us this. He first uses some kind of list, and then head, and then I don't know what.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, as far as I know, Ed and Dan are the people who have worked the most in that, real world, I want to communicate with the Arnode for a specific purpose kind of path,
Well,
so,
yeah, and also Kayvon.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, and Kayvon too.
Yeah, I've been trying to playing with some mobile app wallets and trying to figure out how to do stuff with the node and trying to play with gRPC, and still not comfortable with that. That's why I'm asking.
So you can see in GitHub in rholang API. There is a JavaScript code.
Archain API.
Sorry?
Archain API.
Oh, sorry. Archain API. That has a function to convert in both directions from gRPC structure to JSON or from JSON to gRPC.
Which is a lot to do with the byte arrays and knowing what's in the byte, what the message types are.
Yeah, exactly. So
Is there some kind of, so the protobuf file is the official description of the API, and if I have some protobuf file, so I can compile the like a JavaScript interface or something like that from that protobuf file, and it should work.
If you're, yeah, that's exactly right. And if you're specifically interested in JavaScript, that's Dan's basically done that for you.
Yeah, I'm not in JavaScript, but
okay.
So protobuf is the source, and I should first go into that file.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
and you should probably. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say the Proto-C compiler has a number of different language bindings.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's much more clear now.
In some cases, in the community apps where I wanted to return more than one thing, I returned a list where the first word was like error, first thing in the list. And so then you can match on the result to see what you got. Is that the kind of thing you were describing? I was not really on.
Yeah, if you're asking me, yes, that's exactly what I was describing. And what I think the path I'm going to take is to return there's going to be a set of modes that it could return: error, good case 1, good case 2, or whatever. And I'll have different parsers for those cases.
Couldn't you just deploy a little rholang to match it? Well, I guess that wouldn't help, would it? Never mind.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that offhand, but the UI is going to update differently depending on the answer. It may be whole different fields that have to be shown.
Ed, I think now I'm getting what you're saying. So you're receiving this data, but you cannot change it before inside the rholang, right? Because maybe inside the rholang you could easily differentiate with these two answers and convert it to string, and on the Scala side you will just have string, right? Or some like a simpler structure.
Yeah, but I think in the here I don't know the correct word, but the response that has a bunch of parentheses all around it in the types, they could be two completely different signatures. Right. Sorry, Joshy?
ADT, abstract data type, or AST.
Yeah, so that, okay, yeah, the ADT coming back could need to be parsed completely differently. And that's fine. I just took me a while to deal with that and to how to deal with that. So yeah, that's great. And then the ability to to modify what is being built up in rholang as you go. Let's say you build up the happy path, and then you realize, oh, I need to return a failure, 3/4 of the way through. So what Joshy was showing would allow that kind of a return value on the eventual return channel. So that was helpful.
Also, I wonder, guys, we've been talking about storing logs on chain. Is it kind of a thing that will be used by people in production, or maybe there should be, in general, the other way to store logs, that you haven't paid for storage, because logs are quite large amount of output printed by the program, and you maybe won't be wanting to have it on blockchain.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you're asking about like what the incentive model is going to be, right? If it's free to store stuff on chain forever, I'm sure lots of people will keep their logs on chain. And
Yeah.
I don't know if any particular implementation has like decided an incentive structure or anything like that.
But what's I wonder what can be the mechanics to get some logs that will show the actual execution on blockchain, but won't be on blockchain.
Yeah, well, the best you can do right now is what Ed showed earlier, which is build your logs up on chain, read them out of the tuple space from a gRPC request, and then add one additional step, which is to go back and clean up after yourself and delete the logs. But without an incentive structure, that's just you collecting your garbage.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Are the logs you're talking about standard out, or am I missing something else? Another structure?
It's more like, yeah, go ahead.
If that was a question for me, yeah, I've been talking about things that ordinary program prints in logs that you can examine later and check if everything is okay.
Yeah. So the thought I had about sort of just filling. I've been using mostly public names, so I was talking about the other day. What's the incentive, for the ecosystem not to have public names that are around forever? And one is to lease public names as well. So whether that public name is used for a log or just a temporary return channel to the client, you could say, hey, I want to use this channel and I only need it to be around for a day, and then it can go away. And that could be paid, although right now listen for data at name is free. and I don't know if that can continue that way forever. Or maybe the listing is free, but the publishing on it, which with the deploy, you declare how long you want it to last.
Yeah, I think that's an idea that's been kicked around and called something like blockchain rent, or I remember that being a conversation a while back.
Can you a little clarify this? But you're talking about putting log messages in the blockchain, right? Not to write something to log when some contract executes, or.
Correct. You're calling them logs, but in general, it's data that hangs around for free. And so let's say I have well, let's use our song for example. Originally, it was, I think, still it's publishing on private names. So it puts it out there and it's there forever. So it's then can be grabbed forever. I think. I don't know if it uses a persistent send or how it does that.
It doesn't have to be a persistent send, as long as no one ever consumes it from the tuple space. Listening for data at name won't consume it. So if you're reading it from off chain, it still sticks around. Okay,
so yeah, that in a sense should be rented if it's on a channel. If it's inside, and that's not the case today, but inside the contract, the intent is, if it's would be, if it's stored in a contract, it would be part of the rent structure. Anyway, problems to solve later.
So you want to know when some contract executes and in which stage, right? So you can see in the log what's happened, right?
Yes. To me, you're using the word log, but from a UI's perspective, it shouldn't need to care about the log. It should just get stuff on names in either public channels or via the registry, private name, or via a public channel.
Oh, like a listen on a name, or.
Yes.
But in this context, what do you mean by log? So I'm not completely clear.
I didn't use the word log. Was it NutZipper that used the word log?
Okay.
I definitely
Yeah.
have used it because I understood that you were trying to capture messages that come from the vault contracts, like, you know, 1 Genesis vault created, 2 signature correct, 3. Isn't that what logs are typically? Like keeping a running diary of what the program's done so far, either for purposes of like updating user interface or debugging postmortem or something like that.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Okay, I was thinking of a different context. To me, those are just different return payloads back to the client. Whether the server keeps them around or not is I wasn't concerned about, but the economics matter.
I see. So you're thinking of them as it's fine if they're ephemeral. They don't have to be.
Yeah, and in my use cases, but that wouldn't work in our song's case. But so that led me to the conclusion that it's the creator of the public channel that has to indicate their intent and their willingness to pay for how long that's around.
Yeah, I think that's a cool economic model. Totally.
Does it make sense to say that we have all this information, right? And when we have a blockchain, all the nodes must execute all the code what other nodes are executing. Yeah. So in that sense, I'm thinking that maybe we don't need to store all this information on the blockchain, right? If you have your own node, you can just replay what's happened before, and you can read every information. You can read what was in that moment in time.
Yeah, Ethereum does that, like with what they call events, basically. Kind of like what you're saying, right? Like you have your node, you can go back and replay those blocks in execution. Oh, you're saying even inspect what was in the tuple space that maybe was later deleted.
Yeah. But some information can be deleted, but if you replay something, you will see this data. And I would like to have ability to replace some unforgeable name or some other name that exists inside, and say, okay, when you send something on that name on my node, just send a copy to this other name that I'm listening. So that I can catch up this event, regardless that I have some code before or not. Yeah. So it would be very useful to have ability to replay blocks or whatever we want with the node, just to see how it's working, and just go to checkpoint before and start again.
Yeah.
Can I also mention something that is closely related? But you've seen my example with HTTP request from rholang. So
I saw it, but I don't think anybody else has. Do you want to share it?
Yeah, sure. Maybe it's too late, but
okay.
But yeah, I have another example in mind, really. not only HTTP. So if you can imagine, instead of HTTP, that we have gRPC.
Yeah, totally.
So we can directly call another gRPC, another R node, and we can control this other node directly from rholang code. So we don't have to exchange protobuf files between these two languages, because this is exactly the code. So my question is how to send rholang code directly into gRPC. I didn't try it, but it's problematic because you can have free variables, and I'm not sure how this will work. But also I'm interested to store my rholang code inside another R node, because I don't want to use GitHub to store.
That's a great idea. Right? That's a great idea.
And I seen somewhere that somebody mentioned how to store source code together with AST of rholang. So I'm interested in that. So what do you think?
I don't know how relevant this is. Let me ask this question, and you can tell me whether this is relevant to what you were talking about or not. I know that the gRPC call for deploying code to an R node right now requires that you pass in a string of rholang code, not an ADT. And that's not just a we haven't implemented it thing yet, and it's not a blockchain specific thing either. The problem is if you pass in an ADT, you could include in there mentions of unforgeable names that you shouldn't have in your lexical scope.
Yeah, but you can also do it as a string. You can just mention something that.
Well, no, you can't mention some. So like if you've deployed some code into the VM and you've created an unforgeable name that like holds your funds or your right to vote or whatever it is, and I have some interest in stealing that from you, if I deploy an ADT, I could do a listen on that name, explicitly your name. Whereas
no, you cannot because this is like a normal name. You know, if I send you a string of rholang code directly from my R node, and I will say I can send you directly my unforgeable name as a string. And
what do you mean as a string? What do you mean as a string? Like
if we can convert it to string, because unforgeable name on my node doesn't make any sense on your node. You cannot listen on them because it doesn't exist on your node.
You're saying forget about blockchain for a second. You're saying just like you have your own row VM and then over here I have some other row VM and you want to make a request from yours to do something in mine. They're not in consensus on the same state machine.
We are not on the same machine, exactly. We are not on the same network because this other network is our GitHub, right? We can have our node network, our node namespace, which has all the codes, and we have like our testnet, and we can just if you want to, for example, now we are building wallets. So I'm imagining maybe we can have maybe we can enter our node REPL, and just say I will do all this stuff without any client application. I will do all this stuff inside ROVM.
Yeah.
And that will be two different networks. On one network we can have rholang code. On other network will be testnet and everything else.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, I like it's getting really close. It's getting really close back to some kind of emergent structure of namespaces. Because so I'm thinking, so the way you described it, like maybe you have a local VM, maybe it's just on your system, or maybe it's a small blockchain or whatever. And I've got another one, same thing. Maybe it's got 6 peers on a blockchain, and we can make these calls to one another. And within each row VM, we have all the security guarantees that a row VM always has, but between them, now we don't have those kind of guarantees anymore. So if you think about building a new row VM to sort of oversee the communication of the two, it almost feels like a natural kind of hierarchy is forming on there.
Oh yeah. That's interesting in the idea, yeah.
Yeah, are you thinking about working on calling one, like our node from another one?
Yeah. Now I know how to do it with HTTP. So I didn't think about that. You said that deploy sends a string. So yeah, we need first to but maybe we can modify deploy to accept.
Well, okay, yeah, but now if you modify deploy to accept ADTs, now you're back to that problem that I was talking about before.
What problem exactly?
For exactly the reasons that you said before, yeah. But here's the problem, yeah. So if you send, if let's say we modify deploy to accept ADTs, right? And then you do this thing where you send some string of code and it even explicitly mentions your unforgeable name from a different VM. I agree there's no problem yet, but now the problem is anyone can refer to any unforgeable name simply by a string. and that's what makes them forgeable. So once there's a name in my VM, if I deploy more code to the same VM that accesses the same unforgeable name, I can steal access to it that way.
Oh, but when you are accepting code from my node, unforgeable name that I sent is just a user defined name. You are see it as a user defined name. So when you parse this code, you will first make a alpha equivalence, and you will replace all my unforgeable.
Oh, you're
because
okay.
For you, they are just names, and you want to have.
So there's going to be, you're thinking of a mapping between names, and
yeah, because unfortunately, it is always something that is only meaningful to your running node.
Okay, but
this is
meaningful in your VM, your whole row VM.
Yeah.
This is coming close to the distributed object store we developed back in the 80s at NJIT.
It does sound like that.
What we did with references and at the boundary was we converted them to remote objects, and we could have remote channels too that reference back to the other originating VM, so that you would have a completely decentralized network of our nodes.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
But Jim, is it a registry already doing this? Because you don't want to have ability to somehow connect to someone else's channel, because you want to communicate that in more secure way. So you say, oh, we have a registry, you must get this channel to the registry.
Well, these are different, different R nodes, are in essence,
oh, you're saying they can have different registry, right?
Okay, they have different registries. Okay, but what you have is, if you if someone listens on a remote address, okay, they're listening on a channel on your node, let's say, and I mean, they're not going to get anything unless you write to that remote channel. I mean, you have to
this is definitely a step further that I was thinking to have a remote channel. I was thinking just to send some.
I was looking to implement remote channels as oracles. You have a program, in JavaScript or whatever, that listens on some channel and acts as a proxy between the two R nodes.
Yeah.
Okay. And with what you're talking about here, we don't need that. But we do need to identify the we have to have a pattern that we use for these remote references, so that
So Tomislav, you're saying you want to you're making an analogy to GitHub here, right? Like you want to write some rholang code, or you want to have some rholang code write some rholang code and then check it into a remote VM somewhere, or run me through the use case again.
So I was thinking that when you write some rholang, you have one file.
Yeah.
And as we now how we store files now, we use Git, and we store it on like a central location, but it's distributed, so it's everywhere. Where is the database? And I'm thinking in the same sense how to store rholang in the same way. So you have a file, but you're not store it in some file system or somewhere. You can directly store it in your running R node. So how I see it, I see R node as a file system, because if we have like a performant R node that we will have in the future, you don't need a file system because you already have everything. You know, you have channels. You can just store it on some channel, which will which can understand your code, and when you access the channel, you can retrieve it back. So in that sense, I'm thinking how to store it in the R node. And I'm thinking also at your example of rho-PM, right?
Yeah. Oh, you've looked at rho-PM.
So this is like a very nice example, right? And if we just extend this to not store it somewhere on the file system and store it on the via gRPC on the R node, that would be the thing.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying. Oh, yeah. And then you can like dynamically link to libraries, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's what rho-PM was trying to do. Yeah, I love that idea. So
I'm thinking how to skip Git and rholang. Git and GitHub.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really interesting idea.
There is one library from this guy, Dominic Tarr. I keep forgetting how the project, what is the name of the project, but he already built Git on this on top of this distributed network.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, nice.
So
the distributed net, like on like IPFS or like BitTorrent or.
Yeah, but it's a different project. Yeah, but it's very simple. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Nice. Good. Well, yeah. I mean, so I'd love to see, like, I couldn't believe how quick you got that HTTP request stuff working in our node. I'd love to see it if it happens, you know.
Well, I will try. So.
Yeah. Nice. Well, I have to take a bathroom and lunch break, guys. I'm going to be working on rholang stuff for the day, though. So if you guys are in the mood for anything, just ping me. I'm definitely down to chat more.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Thanks for hosting, Jim.
Yeah, thanks for recording. I'll pick up the recording and post it.
Cool. All right. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah.
And do we want to say a time that we'll come back? I know there's more stuff I want to see. I still want to see some Roxy stuff. Oh yeah, I don't have as much of an update on Roxy as I was hoping to, but I know what I want to work on next. We could talk about it if yeah. Well, I mean, what did you want to see in particular? Well, I guess I want to see what we lose by not distinguishing processes and names. Oh, I'd like to talk about that. Yeah. I want to understand it more, mostly. Oh, sure, yeah. Just beware that the interpreter isn't quite workable enough to like we couldn't do that cell pattern that we did today. It's just not quite good enough yet. Maybe we can show how it will work in the future. We definitely can write the code. Absolutely. Yeah. That would be cool. All right. Yeah, cool. I'm down for that.
Hey, real quick on the note of distinguishing between processes and names. So I recently watched Kyle's rholang syntax and semantics presentation. I think it was from Archon 2. And he explicitly mentions the asymmetry in like sending, a process receiving a name. He like made somewhat of an argument in favor of you need to have the asymmetry. I didn't fully understand it, but maybe that would be something to look into if you're still questioning whether it's necessary or not. Yeah, I should watch that. I felt like I was to the point where I was no longer questioning because I was convinced. So I definitely watch Kyle think about it. Yeah.
Isaac, now that you mentioned that, on Christian on his last video, he was just like writing this how is PyCalculus different from raw calculus? And you have this for name, you have this like a wire that comes from input to output, from output to input, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in between is at is a quote.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if you just remove this quote and say, I will do it automatically. In that case, then this makes sense to me, because what Joshy was saying, it's really makes sense.
Yeah, I mean that almost seems like to remove that quote constructor is kind of like just equating names and processes, right? It's like, you know, they are the same. You don't even need to distinguish them whatsoever.
But I'm not saying they are the same.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying you can say they're not the same,
Yeah.
but because I know exactly the place they're inside the term,
Yeah,
I can
right.
definitely say which type they are. Are they a process? Are they names?
Yeah,
So
right. You can definitely distinguish by the context with which they appear in the term. Yeah, and so I don't know if you know, like using the quote constructor is like, you know, equivalent to like this you know, distinguishing them like from the context. I'm not 100% sure about that.
Yeah, it's totally the same for me.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that in every context you can conclude this. I'm not sure about that, but yeah, yeah. But until now, I don't see any problem with that. So
I also don't see any problem with it, but I just wanted to mention that yeah, Kyle explicitly talked about it. So, and that was kind of the first person that I'd ever heard say anything like, "Oh, we need this asymmetry," because otherwise it's just there in the row calculus paper, right? And it's
yeah, but I'm not saying that this is not needed. I'm just saying that maybe it's not needed in the syntax.
Yeah, right. Maybe it's not needed in the syntax. Yeah.
Yeah, but because what Joshy said and showed me, it's really not needed. You know, it's just on syntactic level, you will know what it is. And
well, even if we can hide it at that level, I think that would do a lot in terms of helping people understand and adopt rholang. That would be pretty nice.
Yeah, not needing
the Joshy mode DApp development.
Yeah, but I was thinking about that, and I'm not completely agree with that because you know, I see this quote as a type. You know, you're saying this stuff has this type, and sometimes it's confusing when you first time using something that you don't see what exactly is the type. So you're. So I'm not completely convinced.
It's even more subtle than that, because you're not showing. It's not like every name starts with an at and every process starts with a star. What you're showing is the conversion between. You're like showing the derivative of that process.
Yeah, you're right.
That's what you're doing.
Yeah, bunch of variables will be without quotes and stars.
Right.
So
the ideal would be if the IDE environment automatically put in the ats and stars where they were needed.
Oh yeah, just depending on the context.
Yeah. I was thinking that I can do it in VS Code extension. You know, when there is an error, I parse the output from the node, and I can really tell what is the error, and I can put some a friendly message to say, okay, you must put a quote here or star here.
Oh, cool.
So what Jim was saying, it could be done automatically.
Nice.
By the time you can put a message saying add a star on line 9 at column 17, you might as well just throw it in and say, see if it compiles now.
Sorry.
But well, by the time you can generate a message that says like the problem is that you need a star at this specific position, you're really basically all the way to being able to put that star in for the user. You know, like when Microsoft Word autocorrects my typos.
I could definitely do it right now. Yeah.
That would be cool. That would be cool.
You think? But I don't like to change the source file, you know. I don't like when you know my editor changed my source file. So I remember the Simon Peyton Jones was once mentioned Haskell version once in the beginning. You know, there was a version that you know when Haskell compile your source file, just delete the source.
Yeah,
that
I
was
feel
like
you.
a bug, you know.
Yeah.
Pretty nasty bug. You know? You have good code, I will delete it now. You have a binary, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's on the blockchain, it will be deleted.
Yeah. All right.
That's funny.
Well, Jim, I don't know. Like, I got my lunch just about made here. I'd be happy to just do some Roxy style syntax, you know, now if you want to do it now.
Sure. I think this discussion pretty much addressed my specific.
Oh, perfect. Okay, cool.
So,
Yeah, that's good.
So we're open. I mean, there's certainly other things that I would like to do, and I'm game for what anything other people want to do too. I mean, I'm working on the governance and social ledger prototypes, and I'd like to get another eye on that in terms of planning,
So yeah, my big goal for today is to implement specifically some hash code stuff in Roxy. So that's what I'm hoping to work on. I know you talk about the social ledger a ton. I'd like to be more informed about that. Is there like a project overview somewhere?
I just pinned to the channel in social ledger channel.
Oh,
presentation of the social ledger 2 design.
Oh, nice.
Which is mostly from the perspective of Yoki. But
who's Yoki?
Yoki. Joachim, he's the primary developer of the social ledger.
Okay. Okay.
He's a member of the of our chain, but not very active on this side. He's a magic in his productivity of all kinds of cool stuff for organizational support. And he uses he's very pragmatic in the tools he uses, but he understands he understands my vision of where I want to go to, and he's just not working on that side of it. And
yeah. Okay, I gotcha. Yeah, I see the pin there. I'll check that out too. I think that's a good place to get up to speed.
Yeah, he put me in there as project lead for the social ledger too. But
nice.
He does what he wants to. He doesn't.
Yeah.
It does cool stuff and it always amazes me.
Yeah. Nice. All right, cool. Well, maybe we should sign off for now then, and pay attention on Colab to help each other out as we're working. Isaac, are you doing K-framework stuff today, probably?
Yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah, nice. Cool. Oh yeah, and then tomorrow, you had something to share tomorrow, I think, right?
Yeah, we could talk about that rholang spec for a little while. Talk about the label transition system that they developed, and yeah, maybe even the cost model. And there's some more stuff after that, but I haven't gotten any further than the cost model.
Yeah, cool.
Somebody mentioned the doing the tree storage. I don't know if that's worthwhile or not.
Oh yeah, I talked about Christian in his seminar had an encoding of like a tree data structure in the pi calculus that I hadn't seen before. that I was thinking about trying to code up. That'd be a good rholang office hours too. Oh, and when we were talking about spawn end processes, I still have a design in mind that I never shared for that one too.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I was thinking of a binary tree that spreads out exponentially, and so in the root you have one process and it spawns 2 more, and in the next generation you have 4 and 8. And then depending on what number of processes you want to spawn, like if I want to spawn 10 processes, then the generation with 2 and the generation with 8 all spawn one of my processes.
Oh, nice.
I thought I saw that done.
Dan had one that was really similar. It wasn't quite the same. His was the thing that gets called recursively takes a lower 2 integers, like a start and an end, and spawns, you know, enough processes for each integer, and each one of them cuts the range in half and spawns a new one. Yeah, it's almost identical. Same time complexity, I think. So, yeah.
I would love to hear about that.
Yeah, cool. Oh, I didn't write it yet though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me do.
Cool. All right, gang. I'm gonna sign off for now.
Yeah.
Okay. See you. See you.
See you later.
Bye.